Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of the Lab Coat. This audio podcast is part of a Labostix Burst. This audio podcast is part of a Labostix and Release, and this audio podcast as part of the Click, and this audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix production. Through this audio podcast, looking at now in around a summary in around works by Mohammed and team from 2016, looking at coping in young people with CKD or chronic kidney disease. So in around the summary, some of the early works, in around a collaborative organization, in around some of the some of the challenges, in around pediatrics and young people suffering with varying forms of chronic kidney disease have been evidenced in amongst the literature. And so there were earlier works from as far back as in around the early millennia. So for example, in around 2000, between 2000 or 2003, investigating the importance, for example, of reduced anti-rejection of pharmacotherapeutics in pediatrics, young people in CKD, and it was in around sort of the literature, and amongst the literature and works that had formed sort of a part of a motivation to develop coping focused research for pediatrics and young people, and at the same time, the objective of the publication, in around the objectives of the phenomenological sort of original research was to identify coping strategies in two cohorts of young people aged between 12 and 18 years. In one cohort, the young people were invited to participate where one cohort was a young healthy cohort, and a second cohort was a cohort that had invited participants with different forms of CKD, and primarily in between CKD stages 4 and 5, so the sort of severe end of the conditions. And it was sort of concluded in the publication, as part of the publication, and from the interviews, the sort of qualitative data collection, and the interview analysis, of that young healthy people and those with CKD, chronic kidney disease, alike utilize a range of coping strategies, and the themes derived can prompt researchers to potentially develop a coping measure for young people, for the young CKD population. At the same time, a longitudinal study or investigation would help to recognize the coping strategies young people adapt over time, and provide and sort to offer or provide a pathway for the development of a formal coping framework. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast is part of the lab coat. This audio podcast is part of a Labostix burst. This audio podcast as part of a Labostix and release. And this audio podcast as part of the click. And this audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix production.